before we start creating any content on our website, we need to find out where our audience are so we can adapt that content to fit. And then we need to map that audience research to our customer journey. So we know that we're creating this for the top of the funnel, we're creating this for the middle of the funnel, and we're creating this for the bottom of the funnel. And this is all for in between. I'm Ryan Jones, and this is SEO in 2026.
Ryan, what's your number one SEO tip for 2026?
My SEO tip for 2026 is to leverage multi-channel SEO along with customer journey matching. What I mean by that is it's kind of a two-pronged approach. So we first need to understand where our audience are, where they spend their time, what platforms do they visit, where do they communicate with other people, where can we show up that generates the maximum amount of impact. And then the second prong is customer journey matching. So we want to match where they are in their journey to the platform they're using. So we know that for some businesses, they might still really find a lot of success with top of the funnel content. They might find a lot of success with social media posts. They might find a lot of success at the top of the funnel with generating interest on Reddit and other platforms and things like that. And then as people dive down into the sort of deeper stages, into the middle of the funnel and the bottom of the funnel, then the platforms that they use will probably move. They might communicate with other people. They might start talking on other platforms. So it's really about creating the right type of content and putting that content in the right place to make sure that we're seen when we need to be seen for the right stage of that journey.
So you started off talking about where our audience are. How do you go about determining that?
So it can be done in one of two ways. There are tools out there that I think the primary tool, and this is the one that we use ourselves, is SparkToro, which is Rand Fishkin's tool. They use a whole lot of Datos data to find out where people are searching for different things and finding out what platforms that they're spending their time. And we can do that through using search queries or describing our audience or looking for job titles that we might be targeting and that kind of thing. Or we can do a more manual approach and we can talk to customers, talk to brand advocates and things like that. And we can just basically survey them and say, okay, so we know that you're a customer of ours or you're a brand advocate or whatever. What pain points did you have at the very first start of your stage? Where were you still searching on Google? Were you using LLMs? Were you talking to different people on social media? And then as you got more interested, where did you go from there? And then finally, where was this sort of decision made that, okay, you were going to talk to us or you were going to buy from us, purchase a product or sign up to a subscription, that kind of thing? Where was that decision made? And we can use that data then to map that. So we can say that, okay, if a lot of the decisions for purchase are made in these areas, and then the top of the funnel really comes from these areas, and we can really then start to map a journey and map a strategy then to match that.
Brilliant. Okay. And in terms of using SparkToro, you can obviously select searches for the keyword or visits the website as the couple of options there. And you also just seem to have United States, United Kingdom, and Canada as the countries that they offer in terms of audience research. What do you use? Do you use searches for the keyword or visits the website? And also, what do you use in countries outside those three that seem to be listed on SparkToro?
Yeah. So for us, it's really a combination of things. So let's say we're researching for a big top of the funnel blog, or what we imagine is going to be a top of the funnel blog post, because we know that people, I'm sure, will have had other tips that gives you in terms of content distribution and that kind of thing. So if we're researching for a large piece of content, we'll start by searching that keyword in SparkToro, the main keyword that we want to target, find out where that particular audience is spending their time, and then we can recreate that content to match those platforms. And then in terms of other countries, they can still use that SparkToro data. It might just be more closely matching. If you're in Brazil, for instance, or stuff, you might find that the US audience most closely relates to your audience than it would be the UK, for instance. But then if there really is a kind of a big gap and you can't necessarily use that data, then it would come down to a more manual approach of talking to customers or going out and doing your own research and really scrolling through social media, seeing, because it comes down to old sales tactics really of finding the right customers, finding where they are and that kind of thing.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, and then obviously you mentioned building a typical customer journey after that, and then matching content that you produce to the right stage of the journey. So maybe diving into the customer journey a little bit more. How do you go about determining where your audience is likely to visit in different stages on their journey?
Yeah. So if we use us as an example, we can start by using sort of last click attribution. So we know that they signed up to a trial for us here, and then we can kind of map their journey from there using different tools and things like that. Like GA4 is good for this because it is events based. So we can track different events that happen. We can essentially drill down into here's where they finally purchased, but they also in different sessions, there was events created here, then they came from here, and then we can almost work backwards. Or we can, like I say, going back to that manual approach of speaking to loyal customers and things like that. And because their data is going to be really accurate in terms of, okay, yeah, I remember Googling for you here and things like that. We can use customer interviews to basically fill the gap where we can't necessarily see the whole journey through GA4 because of, we know that there's whole issues with like privacy and stuff, and not everyone will have their full journey match because of privacy settings and things like that.
And do you build multiple customer journeys? Because obviously, no two customers are necessarily the same. We've got lots of different potential touch points from social media to AI search and many of the places online that people could go to. So, do you want to establish some kind of most likely scenario and just build a customer journey around that and content around that, or do you have multiple journeys?
Yeah, so for us, we do have multiple journeys, but we also have a sort of primary customer journey, if you like. If we say that for example, for us, our primary customer journey might be that they see a piece of blog content and that's very top of the funnel, very informative. And then they might see our name mentioned on social media and they relate back to that content. They say, oh, I remember that name because they really helped me with this piece of or this problem that I had earlier. And then they might Google us a little bit more, come back to our website from a direct visit. So typing our URL into Google, and then they might sign up to a trial from there. And that might be the primary customer journey in terms of the percentage of trials that we get. But we know from our data that we also have customers who sign up to trials who never even see our website prior to signing up for a trial. What we're seeing that like more recently is we're seeing people find our name mentioned in an LLM, and then they might move to social media and have a little look around there. And then when they decide that they're ready to buy, they might then quickly go on the website, sign up to the trial and that. But they never see any of our like top of the funnel content. All they really see is a mention in an LLM and then a quick search on social media. So we can map different customer journeys for that, but we always want to be focused on the one that is driving the most leads, the most conversions and that kind of thing. And that's where the primary customer journey comes in from. That's the one we're going to spend most of our time on. And then where we can, we'll fill in bits for different customer journeys here and there when there's time, when there's budget and all that sort of thing.
So you mentioned GA4 as well. Is that a tool that you typically use to try and establish what different stages in the journey are likely to be and just put as much meat in the bones in terms of, I guess, attributing the likely value of each step in the journey?
Yeah, as much as we can. I mean, this all started for us with essentially a quick report in GA4 to find out what blog posts we had on our website that led to trial clicks and like clicks to our form to sign up for a trial and that kind of thing. And it all kind of started from there. We realized that people were dropping off and then coming back at different points. So then from there, it was really a process of, okay, we rather than just tracking the content that's working for us in terms of trials, like we can still look at that. But let's look at where people drop off. Do they then come back from a different platform? Do they have a different referrer and that kind of thing? And really starting to build it out from there. And this is why I'm now a big advocate for avoiding churn cycle SEO, I like to call it, and really sort of focusing on the customer journey and the attribution from that.
Okay, churn cycle SEO, and that's just throwing as many people as possible at a blog post and hoping as many people as possible convert, I guess.
Yeah, essentially that. And before I really start like bashing anyone, like we have been guilty of this in the past in terms of like me in previous companies, in even where I work now, we've definitely been guilty of this before. But yeah, I describe it as essentially a keyword rank kind of cycle. So we pick a keyword, we write some content, we rank for it, and then okay, that's cool. That's in the AI overview now, or it's in the top position in search. But we'll come back to that and refresh it in a little bit. But let's now focus on what's this next keyword that we can target? What's this next blog post that we can write? What's this next thing that we can create, essentially? And I think the question has to come around like, if this piece of content was removed from our site right now, would anyone notice? Would anyone care? If the answer to that is, oh no, okay, people wouldn't necessarily care about it, then that might have been the wrong piece of content to create in the first place. So content production still absolutely has value. We can track that with the visits that we have on our website. We know that it leads to trial clicks and that kind of thing. But the percentage of blog posts that we have on our site compared to the percentage of ones that actually generate business for us is a whole different ratio than what we thought it might have been originally.
So going back to after you've established your customer journey, I guess the next stage after that is determining the likely intent for each stage of the customer journey, and then mapping content to that. So how do you establish the intent, and how do you decide upon the piece of content that's most likely to resonate with that individual at that moment in time?
Yeah. So some of it comes down to intuition, as a lot of marketing subjects will. We know that if someone's looking at a very informative blog post on a website, a very top of the funnel search, then they're generally going to be in the sort of very early stages, that research stage. They might have no interest in signing up to us at all. They're probably just looking for an answer to a problem. And then if they're going to social media, we can say that they might be sort of starting to get to that middle of the funnel. They're still looking for information, but they're at this stage, they might be about to ask people for product recommendations and things like that, or looking to see information about a company in terms of who works there, what kind of content do they put out, can I see any screenshots of the tool and that kind of thing, or screenshots of the product if you're a different type of business. And then if they start getting into like the sort of LLM journey or the sort of features page on a website or even the pricing page, then we can deduce that they are probably in that sort of, okay, now there's real purchase intent here. They're looking at the features that we offer, or they're looking at the products that we have. They're looking at the kind of prices we are compared to competitors and that kind of thing. They're looking at LLMs to say that, okay, if I'm using this tool, then what can it do for me and that kind of thing. So we can really deduce from there that they are probably in that buying stage. And then it comes down to the type of content that we create. So we know that creating a sort of 4,000 word guide on SEO testing for us as an example might not necessarily be great for someone who's got purchase intent. They might have they already know what is going to help and that kind of thing. But if we can drill down and improve our features page and we can add in the new features that we've built and that kind of thing, then that's going to be more useful. Or if they're in the sort of middle of the funnel, then we want to still be informative, but we might want to drop different product features just in there, just naturally in like a little bit of the content that we put out on there. Like, okay, we have this feature to solve this problem and that kind of stuff. And then, yeah, top of the funnel content will always be top of the funnel content. That's just focused on, let's just be as informative as possible, limited CTAs, that kind of thing. Let's just help someone solve a problem at the first port of call.
And how do you go about tracking organic performance on other platforms like LinkedIn, Reddit, LLMs, YouTube? Do you try and bring everything into the one platform and match it against your primary customer journey?
Yeah, so for us, it's quite manual at the minute. So we essentially have a master spreadsheet that tracks month on month in terms of how many visits we had, or how many impressions, let's say like how many impressions we had on social media, how many views our blog got, how many views our videos got, and that kind of thing. And then we drill down and we look at lead data. So within our internal CMS, we have the number of people that signed up to a trial. We have where their first visit was and where their last visit was before clicking on the trial page and signing up. So we can start to match that. So we can see the numbers of people, okay, these people came from organic first and then they came back via YouTube, or these people actually visited us first through ChatGPT and then came back through a direct visit and that kind of thing. Essentially for us, it's a big messy spreadsheet at the minute that needs a lot of time and care and probably some work from my side to make it look better. But it is useful for us. We can see the big array of numbers and then drill down into lead data, which makes it useful for us because then we can use that to adapt our strategy going forward. We can see that, okay, like a lot of people now are really starting to see us first on social media. So let's put some more effort into that. Or, oh, this sponsorship that we did for this newsletter had really like generated like a lot of leads this month. Let's do that again if we can, and things like that. So we can really start to match it from there.
Okay, you mentioned first in social media and talked about sponsorship as well. Is that really an SEO's role moving forward?
I think it's going to be more of an SEO's role as time goes on. The one thing that I think every SEO can agree on at the minute, we all disagree about a lot of things, but I think the one thing that we can agree on at the minute is that clicks from organic traffic are going down. It's just how it is. We're seeing click drop off from AI overviews. AI mode is starting to become more and more prominent in search. People will start using that more and more. And I think as the role of an SEO goes on, we really have to think less of ourselves as just Google, just Bing, just these platforms. Let's try and look at and adapt our role into that multi-channel SEO, because at the end of the day, things will evolve and become search engines. We saw all this data and these news articles coming out years ago that TikTok is now a search engine because people are using it to actually search for things. The same will happen with LLMs. They won't just be tools for helping us to do things faster. They will be things that people are already doing it. People are starting to search for things on ChatGPT and Perplexity and things like that. Search engines nowadays aren't just Google. They're not just Bing. They're not just Microsoft. They're not just all of that. They are these different platforms that are coming, and people are using YouTube as a search engine. People are using LLMs as a search engine. So as that starts to happen more and more, I think our role really does need to adapt and change. And I think more of that kind of stuff, like sponsorships, like social media, will start to come into it more and more.
Ryan, what's the key takeaway from the tip you shared today?
My key takeaway is two things. Before we start creating any content on our website, we need to find out where our audience are so we can adapt that content to fit. And then we need to map that audience research to our customer journey. So we know that we're creating this for the top of the funnel, we're creating this for the middle of the funnel, and we're creating this for the bottom of the funnel. And this is all for in between.
Ryan Jones is a marketing manager at SEO Testing. Find out more at seotesting.com. Ryan, thanks so much for being part of SEO in 2026.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I've been your host, David Bain. Get your copy of SEO in 2026, the book, over at seoin2026.com.